And here's the question. Is this McFarlane Toys DC Multiverse steel better than the MAFEX steel? Y'all are going to hate me for this, but hey, what's happening, YouTubers? We're back with a brand new action figure review, and today we're going to take a look at the new McFarlane Toys DC Multiverse steel based on his appearance in Reign of Superman. Now, I've actually had this for a while, but I was in the middle of moving, so now that I'm a little bit settled in, I thought, why not go ahead and do a review, because there's a lot to say about this. Like, is it better than the MAFEX one? Seriously, is it? I don't know. We'll find out. But like we always do with reviews, let's get started with the box art first. Standard McFarlane Toys DC Multiverse box. That's enough of that. All right, let's get steel out of the box. Alright, here's steel out of the box, and before I proceed with the review, you might have noticed something different. But for those of you that have been following my channel for the last couple of years, you'll know exactly what this is. It's a Dragon Star series base that I've been using for my reviews for a long time, and I kind of stopped. But because I'm in a new spot, I thought, you know what, let's change it up. Let's bring it back and kick it old school. So, going forward, you're going to see my reviews being done on the base again. Anyways, that's enough about that. Let's get started with accessories first. So he comes with the DC base plate that you see with all McFarlane Toys figures. Now, steel does come with one weapon accessory, it's this hammer, but what's going on over here? Am I playing Hungry Hungry Hippos? And I know some of y'all out there might say, oh, just heat it up and fix it in place and all that stuff. True, I can do that. But let me make one thing perfectly clear. When it comes to retail figures and domestic figures, heating it up should never really be an ask of the consumer. Back in my day, I've been collecting toys for over 30 years, and typically you get the toy out of the box and it works fine, or you start playing with it, or you start posing it. You should never really have to depend on the user or the customer heating up a product for it to work properly. And this is one of those things where it's like, yeah, I can do it if I need to, but it's just kind of frustrating that, like, right out of the box, the plastic they use is just this like soft one that gets warped easily. So I'd imagine over time, if you're having them displayed like this, the hammer's eventually going to get ooh like that. And just like all DC Multiverse figures from McFarlane Toys, it comes with a data file card, so you see the image artwork of steel, and on the back is the data file. Feel free to pause it if you want to go ahead and read it. Alright, now let's take a look at the figure itself. We'll get started with the head sculpt first, which I gotta say looks really good. I think one of the strong points of this figure is the head sculpt. Now, I believe the sculptor was Crash Jordan, I believe, who sculpted this. And the funny thing is, like, he kind of looks like Shaq, the head sculpt. And I remember, I think Crash posted a story about this head sculpt and put like the Shaquille O'Neal photo and said, really not really because of licensing, but I want to say like there was a little bit of Shaq put into this, you know what I mean, in terms of the sculpt work, but I think it looks fantastic. I'm going to take a look at the rest of the figure. It's sculpted fairly well, and it stays true to the source material for John Henry Iron Steel. The one thing I'll point out, though, and I know some people have, are like these blue swirls or blue marks around the outfit, or around the figure itself, I should say. And I'm not sure if it's meant to emphasize the finish, like on the steel, but I think it would have been better without it, just because it would have been a cleaner finish, thus, you know, emphasizing the actual steel aesthetic instead of like these just random, like, to me it just kind of looks like paint splashes on there, which I understand what they were going for, but for me it just doesn't do it for me. But let me know what you think in the comments below. Another thing I wanted to highlight is the emblem. I understand that they wanted to add like a little bit more intricate detail and sculpting work on the emblem, but in my opinion, it's one of those cases where you're doing too much, and simplifying it could have been better in the long term, just comparing it to the source material. And I know these data file cards never reflect how the figure will look, but I think if they would have kept a cleaner S logo, it probably would have looked better overall for the figure itself. I appreciate the effort still, but yeah, I would have much rather preferred a smoother S emblem instead of what we got, but it is what it is. In terms of the rest of the figure, I do like the cape. It's not heavy draped like you've seen on like Hush Batman, where it's, you know, pushing the torso down a little bit or back because of how heavy the cape is. So the cape's fairly pliable. I do like that. And I'm glad it's not a windswept cape. It's kind of a neutral one. So like going forward, like, I would much rather prefer the capes be like this design as opposed to one, you know, windswept direction that we've seen before, but the chances of it staying like this is highly unlikely because they do like to change it up, which is fine. But also I want to make note, the shoulder pads are actually sculpted onto the cape, so when you're moving the arms, it might hinder it a little bit. Now, and then when you move it down, you might notice that, so you might just have to try to push it down a little bit. The only thing I'll say is I'm never a fan of when they put the shoulder like shoulder pieces on the bicep because it interferes with the actual shoulder. I would have much rather they put this on the shoulder itself instead of on the cape, just because in some ways it does kind of look awkward. I'm not going to delve too much into articulation, but one thing I do want to showcase is the diaphragm joint. You saw in my Warhammer video, the movements on those are fantastic. The cool thing about the steel figure is it does have a nice smooth movement for the diaphragm joint. There's no resistance or anything like that. It does move fairly well. The only thing is, you know, forward movement isn't really there, but going back is, yeah, for sure. But I do like that there's no resistance on the, you know, movement all around, which is pretty good. Another interesting thing to note, zoomed in on his crotch, is that the you know, trunks or the diaper piece is a hard material. So that, jeez, that limits and hinders a lot of the movement forward. We haven't really seen this in a while, since like year one of McFarlane Toys having the license, because on the trunks on here, it's a harder material, thus limiting its movement going forward, which is surprising. I'm surprised they use it on steel. Now, when comparing it to like Chad's Superman, you know, the crotch piece or the, you know, the trunks, the diaper piece is a rubber one, so you're able to have more forward movement, whereas they decided to kind of go back in time and kind of use a harder trunks piece, which is kind of strange to me. Alright, now it's going to jump right into size comparisons. And first size comparison, here's steel standing next to the Action Comics 1000 Superman and the Future State Superman, which I thought this was reusing the same legs as this, but upon further look, it doesn't look like they're using the same legs on steel. It just looks like they both kind of have that long leg syndrome, which steel doesn't look as bad as the Future State Superman because, I mean, just proportionally, it just looks kind of awkward, but with steel it kind of works. And next size comparison here is next to some Reign of Superman characters. We have Superboy on the left and then Chad Superman on the right. Shout out to Toy Games for dubbing this dude Chad Superman. And next size comparison here, steel standing next to more McFarlane Toys DC Multiverse figures. We have Solar Superman on the left and the Supergirl Target exclusive on the right. And next size comparison, here's the McFarlane Toys steel next to the MAFEX steel. And here's the question, is this McFarlane Toys DC Multiverse steel better than the MAFEX steel? Y'all are going to hate me for this, but of course not. When comparing them side by side and looking at them, yes, this is at a higher price point, but that high price point is warranted when you look at the plethora of accessories he comes with and the soft goods wired cape that has it on both the sides and the bottom. And oh, by the way, the emblem is painted on the back. Now, having said all that, there's nothing wrong with getting the McFarlane Toys version. If you want a steel... get it? Stupid. If you want a steel figure at a retail price that's fairly affordable, then by all means this is a good substitute or a good stand-in. And of course it'll scale well with all the other DC Multiverse figures. But if you're asking me which is the better figure, I think the MAFEX one will always be the better one just because of the plethora of accessories. The finish they used was a much shinier finish, which I wish McFarlane Toys went with, because we've seen them do it before, especially with Captain Atom, so I'm wondering why they couldn't really implement that with this steel figure. But like I said, it's still a good figure. However, in my bias, I'm always going to lean more towards the MAFEX, and I'm not saying MAFEX is the end-all be-all, because trust me, I've had my few problems with their figures, but when comparing both of these, I'm going to lean more towards the MAFEX one. But again, the McFarlane Toys one is also a very good alternative. But another big difference is the MAFEX one isn't really as limp as the DC Multiverse version. And now time for random ass size comparison, but still keeping it within the McFarlane Toys banner. Here he is, the next couple of My Hero Academia figures. We have Deku, Not Todoroki, and Ochako. I shit in heart. Alright, some overall thoughts on the figure. I like it. I think it's good. It's a good representation of steel for your DC Multiverse display and collection. I mean, there are a few mishaps that I will, you know, critique. Like, I don't understand why they used a harder plastic piece for the trunk / diaper piece. The warping of the weapon is also kind of frustrating. It looks kind of silly. And I know you can heat it up and all that stuff. But overall, I do like the sculpt work of this figure. And like I said, it will look good in your display, especially if you're building out your DC Multiverse Reign of Superman display. I think now I'm going to end up having to pick up Eradicator from BBTS because I passed up on him a lot of times. Now I'm like, you know what? I'm going to build out my own Reign of Superman on my DC Multiverse display. It's either that or I shell out like $300 to $400 building out my MAFEX one, which I don't think I'm going to do that. But yeah, let me know what you think in the comments below. YouTubers, are you picking this up? Which one do you prefer, the MAFEX one or the DC Multiverse one? Sound off in the comments below, and like always, if you like what you see, be sure to hit that like button. If you're not already subscribed to the channel, go ahead and subscribe. Thanks for watching.